Hi there, and welcome to my series of classroom hints. Today's session is about the three types of learners. So we have the auditory learners, people who just sit there and listen and seem to absorb it and take it on. I suppose in teenagers, young ladies are better at doing this than young fellas. We seem to catch up a little bit later on, but it's just a maturity thing at that stage. There's the visual learners, people who like to see what's happening and get an idea of how to do the problem or the project. And then there's your hands-on learners. Now, but what if you are a visual learner or a hands-on learner and the teacher tends to talk too much? Now this can happen, and I think we're all guilty of this from time to time. We get on a roll and we think we're giving great guns and we seem to rabbit away and talk away, and we forget. We do know that the class is probably divided up. About a third of the people in the class are good at they're just sitting and listening, the auditory learners. Others need to see it done, they're the visual learners, and then probably another third need to say, right, I've heard about it, I've seen it done, let's get in and do one, and then I'll feel a whole lot better about it. So as I said, three types of learners. The auditory learners, you have people who are good at just listening and absorbing, and they seem to be able to do this lesson after lesson. Visual learners, people who need to see the maths problem or the science experiment or the wood-making project done before their very eyes. I can remember as a little kid, someone used the expression about watching someone, whether someone used a certain technique for drawing or painting or writing, and you saw what they were doing, and that person said it was stealing with your eyes. So you certainly can, that's a form of learning. Us humans learn. Our CPU up here receives information by listening, seeing and doing, touching. We've got a CPU and a computer that receives information with scanning or typing in or downloading. So our CPU, auditory, visual, and then of course kinesthetic, or the people who hear and see it but don't really understand it until they've actually had a go at doing it themselves. So they're hands-on learners. So it's interesting to note that 500 years ago Confucius said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And the three types of learners are certainly in line with what this famous gentleman said. And I remember when I first started teaching, the headmaster said to me, he said, don't forget hands, eyes and ears. And probably halfway through my teaching career, up comes this information about excellence in teaching. And the terms I used, of course, were, just backing off, the terms I used were auditory learners, visual learners and kinesthetic. So we knew about it, but we just didn't put it in those terms. So teachers are aware of the three types of learners and will normally follow this pattern. So firstly, they will introduce the topic by telling you about it. So about a third of the students will be happy with this style of presentation, so they'll tell you about it. Secondly, they'll put an example on the board or the screen, so they might have the screen and the board, so they'll rule off. They say, right, I'll demonstrate an example. So when they put an example on the board, they demonstrate the topic. And this is especially good for visual learners. Again, it's about a third of the students who connect with this particular method. Then thirdly, after they've told you about it, then they do a demonstration on one half of the board. They might rule off and say, righto, let's do a demonstration example and let's do one together. So over on this side of the board, they say, righto, let's pick on the first example in the book. You guys get started. I'll give you a few minutes to start and I'll put on the board. So this is what's called guided practice. So you can have a look up on the board if you're in trouble, or look off your desk mate, or help each other, and you're actually doing one. It's hands-on learning. So tell you about it, show you an example or a demo on board or screen, and thirdly, let's do one together. So the teaching pattern continued. The teacher will commence an example on the board or screen, encourage students to also start the example. As I said, this is called guided practice because students get a chance to try their hand. So the little term trying your hand is actually hooked in with hands-on learning. So try their hand at one while being able to peek a look at the teacher's example on the board or screen, or look at their mates working. Now, independent practice comes after guided practice. So after you've received the benefit of guided practice, that's from your teacher or your desk mate, in the classroom it's time to try your own hand at home, and that's your homework. So when you go home, it's called independent practice. You're on your own, there's nobody to guide you, just as you will be in the upcoming exam. So what's happened in the classroom, you were told about it, the teacher did a demo on board or screen, and then reeled off, let's do one together. That's guided practice. But when you go home and try it on your own, no one to help you there, that's independent practice, and that's exactly how it will be when you're sitting in the exam. And as I said earlier, in a different lesson, if the little mouse in the maze, the mouse is here, the food's down here, the mouse tries one way, tries another way, tries a different way. So what the mouse is doing is finding out what doesn't work. And finally, what doesn't work finally leads to what does work. And it's the same if you don't attempt your homework or do your homework, you won't know what doesn't work in the maths problem or the science problem or accounting, whatever else it is. So if the first time is in the test or exam, that you really try to work it out. If you've just been lazy and said, oh, I'll get it off the board tomorrow, or the screen and the teacher puts it up, just copy down, seems easy enough. But in the exam, if you haven't been through that problem-solving process, you haven't worked out what doesn't work. So independent practice, very important. So, a problem. So what if you're a visual or hands-on learner and your teacher forgets to cater for the three types of learners and ends up talking for most of the lesson? The solution. So some teachers have a bit of a reputation for talking too much, and we're all guilty of it from time to time. So as you move from class to class or lecture to lecture, you'll know that some teachers talk a lot, some don't. All of us are guilty of it from time to time, so you need to be prepared. Now, what you need to do is you need to be able to have a technique that's going to convert an auditory delivery into a visual and hands-on reception. So the teacher is rabbiting on a bit too much, it's all starting to go blah, 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 as the information flows into one ear and out the other, and you don't want to walk out at the end of the lesson by not knowing what's happened during that lesson. You need to capture some information. So be prepared. What you need to be able to do is have this technique to convert an auditory lesson or delivery into a visual and hands-on experience. How do you do this? You need to have pen and paper handy. So if the teacher is starting to talk too much without catering for the visual and hands-on learners, you need to start taking some notes. So if you just sit there and listen, it will all become a blur, as I just said a minute ago. It'll just be blah, 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 and you'll finish the lesson not remembering, knowing what the important points were. So mind maps are a great little summary tool. At the end of this session, I'll mention my website and the book I've written that has a whole chapter on summary techniques. But what you can do is, as the teacher is talking away, you might start a mind map. Mind map, you put down the first important point that the teacher is talking about, you put inside the egg or the circle or the oval. And as I always start at 1 o'clock, so I know which is so if you now imagine an analogue clock, midday here, 1 o'clock I always start the first point here and work my way around. Now some sub-points might even have their own little points leading off from them. So we've got pen and paper in our hand, and as the teacher's rabbiting away, talking away, you're starting to capture some information. So you might have a page there, so you start a little mind map on top with the first important point the teacher's talking about. if the teacher goes, you may need to have several mind maps. So as you go down the page, there might be several mind maps or eggs to that page, all of them with supporting information and little, trying to capture the important points on a little summary technique. Just the key words, you don't need all the ands and the buts and the therefores, whatever else, just the key words. So you might need several of these mind maps as you go. But if you're not keen on mind maps, you can use the family tree idea turned on its side. You can use dot points. I mean, the chapter that I mentioned a minute ago in the book certainly goes through a number of these. So what have you achieved? If the teacher tends to talk too much, and because you are not an auditory learner, you can't just sit there and let the lesson go by on you, or get away on you rather. You must become active, become an active learner, active listener, and convert an auditory delivery into a visual and hands-on experience. Now it's visual and hands-on, just go back one slide, it's visual and hands-on because you're using your hands to do the summaries, and it's visual because you're looking on the page and you're converting words floating in the air to a hands-on and visual reception on your piece of paper. Must become active, as I said, and convert the auditory delivery into visual and hands-on. And it is better to come out of a lesson with some facts and figures captured on paper than nothing at all. If you just walked out the end of the lesson, it was all blah, 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 then it wasn't worthwhile being in there. So if the teacher does talk too much, or rabbit on, as some people say, and as I said, we're all guilty of it, then you need to pen and paper, some sort of summary technique, and capture the information. But remember, as a student, you command a fairly powerful position. Now, I say to students that come and talk to me about problems in classes, I say it's like having a remote control. This is a little presenter, but it's like having a remote control in your hand. As you sit in class, you can pause the lesson, you can rewind the lesson, you can even fast forward the lesson, just by the type of question you ask. So in my other session on how to get the best out of each lesson, one of my points there is you must put your hand up and ask questions. Don't think you're the only person in the class that doesn't understand, because you won't be. There'll be several others, but people always think, oh, I'm the only one, oh, I better not ask, I'll sort it out later. So you really do need to start asking questions. So by pretend you've got a little remote control in your hand, by the type of questions you ask, you can pause the teacher. As I said, you can even rewind, just like on the DVD player at home. You can rewind, you can even fast forward by asking a question about what the, if you're previewing the work or reading ahead, you can ask about what's coming up. So you've got a very powerful position as a student. You can direct the pace of the lesson just by asking questions. Now, if you don't want to do all this yourself, get some of your mates organised, and you give each other a little look and say, look, I don't understand this, so it's someone's turn to put up their hand. So, as I said, it's like having a remote control in your hand. Just by the type of questions you ask, you can rewind the lesson, review it, going back over. You can pause it to understand a certain point. You can even fast forward if you want to do some previewing. As I said, maybe get some friends organised to share this around so you're not the one that's asking the questions all the time. And it doesn't matter if you are the one asking the questions all the time. As teachers, we're used to that. Some students are game to ask questions over and over. Look, I hope this has been of some help to you. If it has, you might like to visit my website by the name of Mr. B's Classroom Hints. On it you'll see that I do have a book, as I mentioned before, about a 200-page book on study skills, exam skills, summary techniques, the time management. There's all sorts of different things there. You can have a look at the chapter headings to see if there's anything that is of interest to you. You can see my other video lessons or uploads that on punctuation, how to get the best out of each lesson. All about homophones, words that sound the same but spelled differently, like T-O, T-O-O, or T-W-O, there, etc. Also on that website is mentioned some other useful websites to help with numeracy, literacy, diet, nutrition, bullying. If if that's a problem, or even depression, where to turn to for some help. So I hope this has been some help. If it is, please have a look, see if there's anything worthwhile there for you. But bye for now, and thank you very much for watching, and maybe see you in one of my other sessions.